Hello, everyone. Welcome into the North Georgia Sports Report podcast. Will Cooper, Art Mosley bringing it to you here on a Tuesday afternoon, October the 17th. Hope you all are doing well. Art, how are you doing, my friend?
Coop, I'm doing pretty good, man.
Yeah?
It's weather's changing. I had to, beg my wife to turn the heat on. She did not acquiesce, so I was shivering my timbers last night as it was cold. But that just means one thing, Coop. When the weather cools down, playoff action, playoff talk, and high school football heats up. And here we are, man. 3 weeks of the regular season left in the Georgia high school football season, and there's still a lot to be determined.
There is. We were just going over some of the playoff scenarios before we came on air here. We've got a lot to talk about. We'll fill you all in on all the information you will need to get you through the rest of this season. Of course, we're very thankful for you all joining us. Our game of the week will take us to Cobb County. We'll be covering Etowah versus Allatoona. Pretty much a playoff elimination game, all things considered.
Yep.
So we'll go more into that in the Etowah segments. Make sure you stay tuned. Have interviews coming up with Coach Kemper and Coach Devine as we, we're not covering Preview in Woodstock, but we do feel like for a Thursday night football game, we should get the winning coach on. And, of course, Coach Devine with their second win of the season and their first region win since 2020, I believe. So, been a while for Woodstock, so we wanted to cover that as well.
Absolutely. It's two good interviews coming up. I'm excited. The always colorful Coach Kemper and Coach Devine with some of the energy that he brings. We're looking forward to that. But before we do, Coop, we've got a few other teams to talk about in the county that deserve some conversation.
Well, let's jump into that conversation. As we always do, we go in alphabetical order. So we will start with the Cherokee Warriors, who lost to Osborne last week. 28-7 was the final. Warriors are now 1-6 on the year. We talked about it on the broadcast and on last week's podcast. Their playoff path now becomes really cloudy and muddled because it's not even just the fact that if you pull off an upset against Walton or North Cobb, you need other things to also break your way because the other teams of Wheeler and Osborne are going to have head-to-head victories over you, so you're going to need more help than that. You really kind of need a couple of upsets, honestly.
Sure.
Now, if you beat Walton and North Cobb and Kennesaw Mountain, then, hey, the rest of this is mute.
Yeah.
But just the way things go, the way we figure it's going to be tough. But focusing on the Osborne game, the defense kept them in the game for a while. They only had 134 total yards. When it gets to that point in the season, I know the weather wasn't great, and I know that Cherokee's thrown the ball around a fair amount this year, kind of been their calling card, but it's real tough to win a game that way, and, the only score that they got was on a Tanner Savasier rushing touchdown. So, for Cherokee, it's a tough break, for sure. It's a game that we felt like they may have put all their eggs in that basket. That was the one that they needed to win. Didn't happen, but they'll get ready to place Walton this week at home.
Yeah, Coop, and we talk, constantly, every team in the county, we talk about turnovers, and I think Cherokee had two backbreakers, turnovers that were converted right into scores. Mm-hmm. And I think that, we talk about that week in and week out with all teams, as I mentioned, and that was a backbreaker last week. For Osborne, it was their, second region win, and they're almost guaranteed. Now, like you said, unless some stranger things happen at this point, but they're almost guaranteed a spot in the postseason, which would be great for that program. And unfortunately for the Warriors, like you said, they've got to go up against a couple of Goliaths over the next 2 weeks, and one of them being Walton, which is not just the prohibitive favorite now at this point in the season to win the region title. They're also people are talking about this team as a state title contender. And I think that, when you face a team like that, normally those teams in that conversation, you talk about the Bufords, the Graysons, the Colquitt counties, the Westlakes from time to time, McEacherns, and maybe not this season, but the Parkviews and teams like that. Historically, Mill Creek, we can make sure we mention them as they got a big win last week. But anyway, this Walton team is right up there in that conversation this year. And for them, I think it starts up front. They bring in, they are gifted a transfer, maybe one of the best, better offensive linemen. I won't say best. That's such a subjective term, but one of the better offensive linemen in Daniel Calhoun coming in, it's just at 6'7", 350. He's gonna be easy to run behind. They've got a couple of running backs that they'll be using, and it's Makari Botifer, and Austin Williams, and those guys will be the beneficiary of that blocking. But, even then, Jeremy Heklinski at quarterback, and, when he was a freshman, he was splitting time, and I can't remember the other quarterback he was playing beside. But, you kind of look at this and, like, is this kid really that good? And he's been as good as advertised. Coop, they're generating about 384 yards of total offense per game, and averaging about 51 points a game. So this is a very explosive, and I know I'm talking about Walton here. We'll get to Cherokee in just a minute, but, just kind of scouting the opponent. Wendell Gregory has got 7 sacks on the defensive side of the ball. Ashton Woods, their linebacker, kind of they're still on defense, has 63 total tackles. So this is a team that can get after it. They've got 3 pretty good wide receivers. Cam Lloyd, tight end Hunter Teal, and then Will Sonderman are their go-to guys at receiver. So a lot of weapons around Jeremy Heklinski, a pretty solid defense. They forced 17 turnovers. That's something that's that's been a bugaboo for our Cherokee County teams. When they lose games, we go straight to the turnover margin. I think any coach would tell you that. So you get your hands full this week with the Walton Raiders.
Yeah, you do, and they have an old Cherokee County vet at offensive coordinator, Tyler Jones, who was the offensive coordinator at River Ridge in their 2020 run. So the coaching's really good. Obviously, the talent is there, whether it be by transfer or homegrown at this point. And you're right. They've dismantled pretty much everybody they've played. Now, they did struggle with North Cobb a little bit. Now, what does that actually mean in the grand scheme of life? Make your own conclusions. But they did end up beating them by 8. Other than that, their next closest game was against North Paulding. They beat them by 20. And, I mean, you can look up the resume yourself. They beat the brakes off of Brookwood, Grayson, Pope, Marietta. They've done it across the board.
Sure.
And you mentioned the Kennesaw Mountain game last week. So, yeah, Cherokee's going to have their hands full. Walton will have no shortage of talent. If you're looking to see some kids that are going to play on Saturdays, Walton is probably a pretty good place to take a look, because I believe they're ranked number 15th in the nation, according to Max Preps in the latest rankings. So they're the second highest rated Georgia school. They got put ahead of Buford after losing to Mill Creek, but Mill Creek's number 1. Or in Georgia, I should say. They're number 9, I think, nationally. So anyway, all that to say that Cherokee's going to have their hands full. But look, there's a reason they play the game. It's at Tommy Baker Field, so Cherokee does get that advantage. They don't have to travel to Walton. Hopefully the Warriors can catch them napping for like 99.9% of the game.
Yeah, it's gonna have to take that. You're gonna have to win the turnover battle. You're gonna have to establish the run. You're gonna have to get off the field on third downs if you're the defense. Be a sure tackler and not let these running backs get going. Put some pressure on Heklinski. I think we could say that about that's a recipe for success for just about any football team across the state of Georgia. Run the football and play sound defense. This is a team, again, when we look back at this Cherokee team, I wonder if we'll say, man, would their fortunes be a little different had they been able to pull out the Sequoia game, had they been able to pull out the Etowah game, where games where they were leading,
right.
late in the ball game, and then again I called them they just tough luck they had in those 2 ball games, and I don't know if what impact those games had on the season, but they've relatively been in most of their games or competitive in those games. This is one where I just don't know if they, player for player, they can match up with depth at every spot against Walton right now.
Well, that's the hard part for Cherokee is that nobody really feels bad for them because of the luck that they've had. But you're right. I mean, you lose, however many games combined by 1 possession, and it's a tough break for the Warriors. And I think your point about Sequoia and Etowah is well taken, because it's not necessarily the fact that it's region standings, but it's more the fact of the confidence, because we've sat on here for the last, month and said they're the best 1-win team in Georgia, and we continue to say that, and I still think they are the best 1-6 team in Georgia, and we see the pieces that are there, and we see that they have the ability to put it together at times. It's just they're, I think maybe including myself, especially more than you picked Osborne to win that game. Credit to you. You saw it before I did. I kind of thought Osborne was sleepwalking through beating up the scrubs, as I called it last week. Obviously not. So credit to Osborne, and look, this is the nature of being in 7A. It really is. You know that the regions are going to stack up in this way where the top teams, and it doesn't matter what region they were in 7A. There's not a weak region in 7A. And they just, right now, just not hitting on all cylinders.
Yeah, that goes for every sport, whether it's volleyball,
yes,
baseball, softball, swimming, tennis. Did I get them all? And certainly football and basketball. And that's one thing, Coop, you mentioned that. I'll never forget coming over from Sequoia to Cherokee, and that's one thing that Coach Shaw said is, boys, there's no easy nights here in Class 7A, and he was awful right. I mean, he was and we learned the hard way sometimes, but you just can't take a week off, and every region is going to be challenging, and certainly the region they're in now with 2 top 10 teams and a Wheeler and an Osborne team that is on the rise. Like when this region was developed, we just said, oh, well, these, are perennial doormats. No, I won't say doormats, but Osborne was kind of a doormat. Wheeler's had some success. Coach Collins had some successful years over there when he was a head coach, and it's been up and down a little bit. But we just assumed that these teams were going to continue to be, kind of where they had historically been, and that certainly has not been the case. They've elevated some of their play. They've been able to run the ball. Osborne has always looked good coming off the bus.
Right.
Going years back, Coop, when I first moved into Cherokee County, I would go over to watch. Sequoia was in their region at one point. I would go over to Skip Pope and watch the game, and I'm like, oh, these guys really look good. And then they get off the bus, and God bless them, they can't chew gum and walk at the same time. That's not the same Osborne team.
No.
And the Warriors were on the short end of the stick last week, and it doesn't get any easier, as we mentioned. I like, and if I'm picking winners here, I like Walton by a big number. I'm not going to disclose that. You'll have to wait till Thursday morning to find that out.
I think Cherokee's probably pretty glad that reclassification is going to be happening, getting out of that region. I mean,
we think we won't be in a region with Walton, Cherokee, but
the devil you know is not always worse than the devil you don't know.
Well, you might.
That works both ways.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
All that said, I have Cherokee up to number 4 in my power ranking.
Okay, I'm going to make a last second. I'm making an executive decision on my power rankings here because I think you talked me down from something. But no, actually, I've also got Cherokee at number 4.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Moving on, let's talk about the Creekview Grizzlies, 6-2 on the year. Although, if you talk about a gut punch of a game, that would be the Battle of East Cherokee that went on Friday night. We were lucky enough to call that game. From an observer standpoint, it was a great game. I mean, we had a lot of fun covering it. Now, obviously, in any of those type of games, half of the crowd's going to be real upset about it. Half the crowd's going to be real happy with it. And for Creekview, unfortunately, tough luck in that one in some regards, although their defense kept them in it with a couple of nice turnovers there. As we were leaving the stadium, the officiating was called into question. But I would like to throw this out there. It was definitely on both sides.
Yeah, I think those officials have called better games on both. There was a couple of questionable calls in my opinion. And I think we've seen this. We do know there's an official shortage.
Right.
And
my point's not to dog on them.
Sure. I think there's the official shortage is one of the reasons why Creekview's playing Thursday night, because they just don't have enough. And I think there's a lot of officials that sit in the stands week in and week out that, hey, if you guys are looking to earn an extra $125 on a Friday night, I'm sure that the Etowah Valley High School Officials Association will be more than happy to take your application. But again, some questionable calls, Coop, and we understand they get graded out, but they don't have the benefit of replay, and things are going at game speed, so we have to. I'm not here to defend every single high school official because there are some that aren't very good. I can tell you from experience.
Yes. Yeah. My point is just to say that from our standpoint, even if we disagreed with the calls, by the end of the night, I think they averaged each other out.
They did.
And there wasn't the officials didn't pick a team to root for.
Correct.
They were just inconsistent.
Very, very much so. And so that's I think sometimes they don't want to kill the flow of the game, but that's as a coach, you want a penalty to be called a penalty, and this, that, and the other. But back to Creekview, like you mentioned, disappointing loss. They were able to have some success running the ball, not so much throwing the ball. We talked about their opposition and that secondary of their opposition. They made it pretty difficult to have success through the air. The weather conditions, I would say that they played a part, but their opposition took a different approach in how they were throwing the ball. didn't take so many shots downfield. They took a couple, but utilized a short passing game to kind of negate some of that weather that we saw. Weather did cause a couple of turnovers, I thought. Made that ball a little slick. And as you mentioned, Creekview was able to cash in on those, but, late in the game wasn't able to get over the hump when they needed to. When they lose their first region game of the season, they fall to 3-1, 6-2. I think for the Grizzlies, though, everything is still in front of them. My question is a question of resiliency for them. Will they be able to leave that emotional game where it is in the past on a short week as they go over to Woodstock, a team who we'll talk about momentarily, a team that has a very coming off a very emotional high, kind of opposite of what Creekview is. And in terms of these teams, they're opposite records. Coop, Woodstock at 2-6, Creekview at 6-2, and then Woodstock 1-3 in the region now, Creekview 3-1 in the region. Is this a trap game? This is my question. Is this a trap game for Creekview? Maybe a little weather late. I don't know. There's a front moving in Thursday night. Could it rain? Could that change the dynamic of the game?
So when a team loses like Creekview lost, they have one of two modes. They can either go into what I like to call hiding, emotional hiding, or they can be in the wounded animal, which a wounded animal will bite you at any chance it can get if you get close to it. So it's up to the team to determine which one they are. I tend to think Creekview, when looking at what they did after the loss to Calhoun, it didn't keep them down for very long. The thing that I'm going to have to see cleaned up is that in the Sequoia game, they were 3 of 15 passing for 62 yards. They are going to have to pass the ball for more than 20%.
Sure.
I mean, 20% completion is just not going to work. So they are going to have to pass the ball. Now, we know that Creekview's a run-first team, but that only works so far if you're one-dimensional either way. And I also think the question is Woodstock riding a high. Obviously, they won the Battle of Town Lake last week. Woodstock's going to be very high on themselves. Creekview maybe a little down on themselves. It's up to the Grizzlies to take that emotion of losing that game and go from being upset about it to turning it into anger and fueling that for a positive move forward. That's one of the things that Nick Saban always talks about at Alabama is you never fail. You never waste a failure.
Right.
And Creekview, in turn, has to view it that way with that loss. Is we failed to win that game, but we can't afford to waste that. We have to learn the lesson and move forward from it. So I think this is not a trap game. I don't see Creekview falling for that trap. I think that this is going to be a very spirited contest from Creekview. I think we'll see maybe the best performance they've put out there. It's their last away game. They're going to be able to know that they get to settle in at home. They're going to get to face Rome to close out their season next week. They get the bye week, the 10th week of the season. Again, the bye week's super weird for them. I think it might be the worst bye week for most teams. Now, they will be, all things considered, most likely a playoff team, mathematically speaking. If they did lose to Woodstock, it would be, they could miss the playoffs, but for all intents and purposes, we will just say that they are most likely a playoff team, so the bye week helps. But I think that if the coaching staff, which I think they will, can utilize that emotion for a positive and say, let's get to this Woodstock game, let's handle business here, enjoy your Friday off, and then let's turn around on a long week, right? Because the short week with Thursday Night Football, you get a long week the next week. And let's utilize that and prepare for Rome because if Creekview beats Rome, then we have a three-way tie, and like you and I were talking about, we have no idea what the tiebreaker is in Region 6, 6A anymore. Normally, it's some kind of version of points scored, points allowed, which would lend itself to think that Rome will still be the region champ, but what does that do with Sequoia and Creekview? I don't know, because Sequoia hasn't really beaten the brakes off of anybody this year, so that's a long way down the road. I know we're getting in the weeds here, but I just don't see it as a trap game. I think Creekview is going to handle their business. I think Creekview will be able to get out there and get a win, and I think they will do it both ways. I think you'll see a much more efficient and spirited passing game.
Interesting. I'm still going to call it a trap game. Beware.
It's potential. I just don't see it.
That the Woodstock Wolverines are laying in the weeds down there off of Town Lake Parkway, and if there's any type of letdown, and you mentioned failure, and Coach Jones over at Brookwood had explained this to me. He this is a few years ago. He said, when we talk about failure, we talk about failing forward, and that it's never final. I think that's right along the lines of what you're talking about, and I think that's not just. I think that's one of the lessons that sports teaches you is that, whether or not you win, lose, or draw, in a game on Friday night, the sun rises the next day, and we have to get up and make a decision to either learn from or wallow in what happened. Again, that's the question for me for Creekview. I do like them in this game. We'll talk about Woodstock side here in a second. But I think they do bounce back. I think this is a resilient bunch. But I also think that it's a trap game, and it could be. Well, I've watched enough sports to see this happen.
Well, yes, I agree. But I also think more recently we've seen the wounded animal side come out a lot more. Just from my recent memory that I can recollect, it seems like teams that lose to teams, I don't even want to say they're not supposed to, because you can't really say that with Sequoia. I mean, the whole underdog thing to me.
Who had Sequoia as an underdog in that game?
Not you.
Okay. I mean, that's relative.
Mathematically, if you're using the predictors, they did. So credit to, the same thing they did last year.
The math
Sequoia said the Cooper predictor is stupid. And I don't have the record on the year, but it's not very good when picking Sequoia games. So credit to them. But yeah, look, I just think that if you're Creekview, and especially a fan of Creekview, you have to be really careful, because it's real easy to jump into the nihilistic deep end, if you will. And, the season's over. Here we go again. We lost to Sequoia the second year in a row. This has never happened before. Da 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 da. They're 6-2, man, and one region loss. You're right. You're not in the catbird seat to host a home playoff game anymore, but you're still a favorite to be in the playoffs, and you're still well within reason, if you do beat Rome, to be in the running. Again, I don't know what the tiebreaker is, so I can't tell you what that is. Now, if it is points scored, points allowed, the one thing that Creekview does not have the luxury of is that last week where Rome will get to play Etowah to end the season, I think, and Sequoia will get to play Woodstock. Well, if it is a points for points against differential or whatever, they decide, Rome and Sequoia will do everything in their power to run up the scores against their opponents. Whether, just depends on the differential, I guess, on what it is. But either way, Creekview does not have that luxury. So that's way down the road. We'll get there when we get there. Anyway, they'll face Woodstock Thursday Night Football. You'll be there.
Yes, I will be there in the stands.
Yeah, I will not. We're not broadcasting the game. We're leaving it to its own devices. We talked about doing it, but I have a little fun fact about my family out there.
Yep.
Don't want to get too personal with everybody, but we do a Thursday night dinner. We've been doing it since I was like 5. So we still go over to my grandparents' house, and the Coopers and everybody gets together, and it's a family tradition we do on Thursdays. If there's one thing people probably don't know about me, it's like sports are very important in my life, but family is number one to me in that ranking. So I decided to go with that, and we'll be there Friday.
No doubt. Family very important, which is why I'm being at Woodstock on Friday. On Thursday, excuse me.
So you're saying you wouldn't be there on your own accord?
It just gives me a good reason to be there, Coop. A
Creepy,
valid reason.
I have number 2 in my power ranking.
Yeah, they're number 2 on mine as well.
Let's jump into the River Ridge Knights.
Okay.
3-4 on the year, bye week last week. They needed it. 2 heartbreaking losses, really, to Creekview and Sequoia back-to-back. Look, I think for River Ridge, maybe one of the most slept-on teams. I would argue that just like Cherokee, they're one of the best 3-4 teams in the state of Georgia. Obviously, it gets tough. They're going to face Rome this week. They do have to go to Barron Stadium to play Rome. Not an easy place to go play. If you are a River Ridge fan and you're traveling out there, hit me up for your restaurant recommendations. I worked there for a few months.
Absolutely.
I've got a couple places you should go try. But despite that, when you look at the actual X's and O's of the game, River Ridge is going to be capable of beating any team because they can score with the best of them. We've saw that with the shootouts that they've been able to put up. They got down to Sprayberry big, came back, clawed their way back in that one. You talk about the Creekview Sequoia games where they were down early, fought back, just weren't able to mount a comeback all the way. So when they face Rome, you're hoping with a team like Rome that they're going to slip up at some point, that they're going to be resting on their laurels. Now for Rome, they also are coming off of a bye week as well, so they've had an extra week to prepare. It's a tough matchup. Obviously, nobody's going to pick River Ridge against Rome as a favorite, but I do think that there's a puncher's chance, as we call it, against Rome this week.
All right, you've give me a puncher's chance, I'm going to give you some numbers here.
Okay, go for it.
I mean, because you love numbers.
I do love numbers. I'm a numbers guy.
Right. Rome, averaging 46.8 points a game.
Sure.
Holding opponents to 8.2 points per game.
Sounds about right.
They've recorded 2 shutouts on defense. And in region play over the last 2 years, Coop, they've surrendered just 39 points total. 39 total points in 9 games. That's 4 shutouts, okay?
Yeah. They
are really good. Reese Fountain is up there in passing yards. We talk about him every week when we talk about Rome. We also talk about his receivers, Stallings, Daniel, Nick Hester. They have a stable of running backs. 2 of them that will get most of the carries are Chance Arthur and Javarius McDermott. I got a chance to watch those guys run the ball. It just run with such force and aggression. It's a little bit the style of football they play. I feel like is just a little bit more physical, and that starts with their young teams and matriculates on to the varsity level. So, whatever Coach Reed is doing over there, it's working. They're physical, they're fast. We haven't even talked about even defensively. You've got 2 linemen, Justin Terrell, Trey Adams, and then a highly recruited linebacker in Jaden Harmon, who has picked up several Power 5 offers. It's almost like Mission Impossible. And again, I understand, Art River Ridge does have a puncher's chance, and they do because they know how to throw the ball around the yard. They can run the ball a little bit. I don't know if they faced a defense like they're going to face this week.
No, probably not.
Or face an offense. I'm trying to think of an offense they faced this year that would even
North Atlanta
mimic maybe from a team speed perspective. Sure, maybe North Atlanta.
That didn't go the way they wanted it to.
Sure,
but they've seen. I don't think North Atlanta's general team makeup. I don't think they're as good as Rome, but
certainly not.
I don't think that across the board they are super outclassed by Rome.
And while we're talking about Rome, I have a bone to pick with every other poll in the state. I have Rome ranked number 2 in the state. Now I could be looking at things through Region 6A glasses.
Well, I think there's a dichotomy with their schedule where they lost to Carrollton, and when you're talking about a state ranking, outside of that game against Carrollton, who did they play? Now I know they beat Sequoia, and obviously here in Cherokee County we think a lot of Sequoia. They're on track to be the region or the Cherokee County champ for the 2nd year in a row.
Sure,
but was it the fact they beat Pebblebrook that impresses you? Was it the win against Lithonia? I think they played.
Ouch.
I mean,
ouch.
I don't want to be rude about it. I just can't think of a win that they have that is that signature win. When you talk about the upper echelon of 6A, I mean, go through their schedule there.
Cass.
Okay, I mean, they lost to Dalton. They're a 5A school. They played Cartersville close, I guess, but so did Cherokee, and we see where that got them.
Okay, I mean, you make a valid point.
Who else did they play, though? Let me make sure I'm not forgetting anybody.
Lithonia, Carrollton, Pebblebrook, Allatoona, Woodstock, Sequoia, and they'll have River Ridge, Creekview, and Etowah to close out the season.
I mean, to me, it's like they just have there's such a gap, and they lost to the team that was competitive with them. Now, look, a loss to Carrollton by 20 points, pretty darn good.
It's a 7A school.
In the grand scheme of things, I get that. And I do agree that them dismantling Sequoia that they did is more impressive than most people are giving them credit for, because there's been a little bit of a bias towards Creekview over Sequoia. Even like on Cal Preps, they have Creekview ranked over Sequoia. I don't know where they get that number still. Obviously, the head-to-head shows you that Sequoia is better than Creekview, even if it was just for one night. But I agree with you on that sense, but I just think that when you look at the rest of 6A, like I'm thinking about, Douglas County being up there, the win against Langston Hughes' signature. Gainesville, their out-of-region schedule was pretty tough. They have some signature wins in there. Who else am I missing in 6A?
Thomas County Central.
I mean, Roswell's ranked higher than them just because Roswell has decimated everybody. And did they beat Milton?
They lost to Milton.
Okay, so they lost to
Milton. Yeah, Milton handled Roswell this year.
All right. But I think that Roswell dismantling everybody that they have dismantled has put them slightly above. Now, I'm kind of the same way about Roswell.
No, but their schedule's not, I mean,
they handle Blessed Trinity. Where does, again, like what is Region 6A compared to Region 7 6A or whatever? I don't know the answer to that. That's up for everyone else to decide. But I don't know why you have Rome at 2. I think that that's a little bit too much respect.
Wow. I just look at the players they have on their roster, and I think they're a lot better than a lot of the other players on other rosters with teams that may have undefeated teams that may or may not be better.
But so when you're doing your rankings, are you doing that as you would pick them on a neutral field with, which, by the way, Rome doesn't play neutral games because they always host Barron Stadium, so it's actually all home games for them. That's a side point. I hate that, but whatever. Or would they be better than Douglas County in your eyes?
Yeah.
Okay, so are they better than Gainesville in your eyes? Who's your number one team?
Gainesville.
Okay, Gainesville's number one, yeah.
And some of that, for me, some of that starts out, and I know we're getting way off the rails.
Yeah.
We're way
Sorry,
off the
River
rails here. Some of that goes into where I had them started preseason. If you keep winning, I mean, until somebody beats you, I try not to get too reactionary. If there's an upset,
I have a problem with preseason rankings for that reason, which I do it too.
Sure,
but I just think that preseason rankings, you say, this team was ranked number one, and then they lost to this team, so this team must be number one, and then they lost this team, so this team must be number. It's like it's so much of a transaction in there that you don't actually ever get to the number one team because your preconceived notion of who was number one.
Sure.
Filters that. I mean, we see that in college football now with the AP poll.
There's a bias.
Why is Florida State ranked so high? Is it their win against LSU that made you so impressed? That
may or may not have been a good win.
Right.
And if you talked about Langston Hughes. If Hughes
right.
plays Douglas County 5 times, do they win 4 out of 5 or 3 out of 2?
Well, that's my point about Sequoia and Creekview is that they played them that night, and on that night, Sequoia was 4 points better than Creekview. Now, if they played it 99 more times, would Sequoia win 99 of them? Probably not. Would Creekview win 99 of them? Probably not. They're pretty close, but you know what I mean by that. And that's kind of what I'm saying with River Ridge here. Maybe this is the 99th out of 100 time when they do play Rome and they are able to pull it off. Maybe it works out for them.
Look, all you have to do is win once, and That's
exactly right.
seen it happen. All right, I've been on the sideline for it to happen.
Any given Friday.
Yeah. So in any event, the Knights, they do have their work cut out for them. It's going to be a game where Spector's going to have to take care of the football. He's going to be going up against a talented secondary, talented defense, as we mentioned. Can they get the run game going? I think that's going to be big. We know that Daniel Green and John Foletra are going to be huge going up against Justin Terrell and Trey Adams in the trenches. That's probably a matchup that is going to be worth noting. Foletra's a young man who's been getting a lot of interest. He's going to have an opportunity for some tape against a couple of the better defensive linemen in the state. So I think that's a matchup that'll be fun to watch. I just don't know if, from a depth perspective, again, I just think Rome is deeper at most positions, and I think that's going to be the difference in the ballgame.
I have River Ridge number 3 in my power ranking.
Likewise.
All right. Let's move on to the Sequoia Chiefs, who get a bye week this week after a big win. We've talked about it already, but let's talk about it from Sequoia's standpoint. 31-27 win at Creekview. Season high 274 pass yards, including Jackson Hancock, who had 150 plus of that. Of course, our player of the week. Congratulations to Jackson. We really could have given it to a handful of players on defense, but we decided that Hancock, with the numbers, we have had Hancock in the conversation for player of the week every time we've covered Sequoia, but there's been, Ian Mariah had the 2 sacks against Etowah. Well, he should do that, and then it was Colby Martin. It's like, well, he had the 2 rushing touchdowns. So we just always kept having him in the conversation, which I think is what happens when you have the best player on the team, most likely. So we finally just, it seemed like the right time, and he clearly, when you got the ball in his hands, made the most dynamic plays. But, that was the big difference to me, was that we've seen Sequoia, and, you mentioned on the podcast last week they had to get to 70 rush yards per game in order for them to make the win or not. And they did get to that number, but they also had 275 passing yards.
Right. I think that was the only time they had, prior to last week, that they had rushed for or passed for more rushing yards.
I believe that is correct.
Was against Cedartown, where they passed for 77 and rushed for 70, and still won the ball game. Every other win, they had rushed more yards than they passed for. And again, if you would have told me in rainy conditions or misty conditions or however you want to call it, that Colby Martin would have 270, and this is no disrespect to Colby, I just don't think we've ever seen this kind of production from him as a passer. And so if I had to bet something on it, I'd be like, no, maybe Colby could have, 150 yards rushing is what I would have thought. And he showed a lot of poise there. I think they designed that playbook. Coach Jack Mine and Coach Teeter designed it to where there weren't a ton of they put him in a great position to have success. Now he's got to go out and execute, and they did. We saw Sequoia come out and put, I would say, a couple of their best athletes at receiver. I don't know if they had injury, but we saw Bretton Darling catch several passes. You mentioned Jackson Hancock make some passes, and when they needed it, we saw Ian Mariah come in and gash Creekview a few times. And again, they were able to. Sequoia did a good job of taking those short and intermediate passing routes and turning them into explosive plays after, on yards after the catch.
Well, slants and the screens, I mean, they just the yards after catch was unbelievable.
Yep.
Which I think is again a testament to Jackson Hancock. It's a testament to Bretton Darling, who we saw also work both ways. So got to see him at receiver a little bit. Tyler Bell, the talent played when they needed to play. And they certainly came up big. So I agree with you on that front. Also, defensively, very impressed. Again, they held Creekview to 30 or 62 yards on 3 completions on 15 attempts. A lot of credit goes to that secondary. Cam Walker had another interception. Obviously, we mentioned the 2 safeties there with Hancock and Darling. Tyler Bell, corner. But to me, the biggest difference was the linebacking core, especially the outside guys, Graydon Zarder, Tewa Wagundale, and then really the guy that we called like most of the game was Anthony Santana.
Yeah.
Guest kept rolling to his side, and Santana did a great job keeping contained, not letting anything get past him, and he forced Guest to throw the ball away a lot instead of the normal Guest able to cut upfield and get a bunch of yardage. So, if you had to give a defensive player of the week, we certainly would have to Anthony Santana because we called his name all the time.
Yeah, we did. Made a couple of great plays in the secondary as well when he had coverage on the backside. So, again, if you're looking at it from a Creekview perspective, you probably won't agree with this statement, but I thought it was a fantastic football game in terms of entertainment. It was back and forth. A lot of momentum swings, very emotional game, and Sequoia just did just enough again to win, and we've seen that a couple of times out of them, a few times this season. You get in a game like the Cedartown game, that maybe bleeds over to the River Ridge game, that bleeds over to the Creekview game, where those guys have been in those games before and have a sense, and even the Cherokee game have a sense that okay, we just need one more drive, we need one more stop, and we know we're going to get it, and so. Hats off to Sequoia. A week off, well earned, and right now, Coop, it looks like they're in the driver's seat for a home playoff game in the first round of the state playoffs come the second week in November. Still got to win their last 2, but I think every pundit would have them, whether computer or human, would have them favored in those last 2 games of the season.
They're going to get Allatoona and Woodstock to close things out. So 2 very winnable games for the Chiefs, considering when you look at what they've done on the resume, right? The resume looks great.
Yep.
It did last year too. The only difference that we were talking about is Sequoia, if they win the games we expect them to win, will finish 7-3 instead of 5-5 like last year.
Right.
And just like we, asked Coach Teeter about like a month ago at this point, how big was that win against Cedartown when you talk about the lock? Well, it's very big. Well, I think the same thing. You feel a lot better about a 7-3 team than you do a 5-5 team, especially when you play Lambert, when you lost to Raven Gap Community College and Rome. Those 3 losses are a 7A school, a jokingly community college private school that has more talent than they know what to do with in Rome. I feel pretty good about, hooking up a trailer with that team and sitting around and watching them play some playoff games.
Absolutely, Coop.
Yeah, I have number 1 in my power ranking.
Likewise.
All right, well, let's move on to the Woodstock Wolverines. Again, we'll have Coach Dan Devine calling in here in just a moment. We want to talk about his team. Obviously, we got to talk to him after the Lassiter win. Wanted to talk to him after this win as well. Very impressive from him. And again, they'll face Creekview on Thursday Night Football. So if you want to go catch a game, if you hadn't been out to the Woodshed this year, it's a great time to go out there. But Woodstock, 17-14 win over Etowah. To me, one of the guys that was the big surprise was Sherrod Ellie. We've seen him and Isaiah Payton kind of split time in the backfield. They've both had their fits and starts. The running game's been good at times, bad at times. We got to watch him against River Ridge firsthand. I thought the running game really came a long way from when we saw him against Cambridge when you and I went out to that scrimmage. So I think that the game has continued to develop for them. And obviously it shows up on the scoreboard, 17-14. Huge win for Woodstock, huge win for that program, not only in the sense of the Battle of Town Lake and how important it is for the kids, but also, we talked about, could Woodstock win a game this year? Was kind of our expectation. Sure. Well, winning 2 kind of surprised me, I think, if you told me back in August that Woodstock was going to be 2-6 with the potential to win a couple more games depending on what happens. Now, look, they're going to face Creekview and they're going to face Sequoia, so 2 of the upper echelon teams in the region. They won't be favored, but it's possible. I'm very impressed with where Woodstock is. I think it says, tons about the senior class. I think it says ton about the individual playmakers, and the defense has really improved week over week. And they got us some young guys that are going to continue to develop as well. I mean, Kaheem Davis, the linebacker, he's a young guy that's going to continue to develop. The offense is going to look a lot different next year. There's a lot of seniors on that team that have, come and really helped. Peyton Lynch, Cam Levette, and then, you got the guys outside. Chase Kalina will return for his senior year, so that'll help. But without getting too deep in the weeds on the individual players, I think Woodstock has the opportunity to continue to build. And like we were talking about with Creekview, coming off of a loss, Woodstock coming off an emotional win, is this a game where Creekview's still down in the dumps and Woodstock's flying high and we see an upset? Or is this the kind of game where Woodstock, like against River Ridge, they came out flat. They did not look very good against River Ridge after the win against Lassiter. I think a lot of times a team that's not used to winning, Coach Saunders, who was at Gilmer for a while, told me, you have to teach them how to win. And one of the most important things about learning how to win is how to learn to win consistently. You won the one game, that's great. Now what do you do next week so you can do it again? And that's going to be the learning curve. So Woodstock also has the added benefit. They played River Ridge on a Thursday night game, so they have had the short week before. So all that plays into it. Should be a good game.
I think it will be a good game. Again, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. I think the Wolverines are down there in Town Lake, laying in the weeds, looking to ambush the Grizzlies this week, Coop. And you can laugh, and I know my Creekview friends will laugh at me and say there's no way, but stick around sports long enough, you see stranger things. And as you mentioned, Coop, there's a team that went over the 100-yard mark rushing. They had 2 rushing touchdowns. I know these aren't big numbers, but Sherrod Ellie has got 240 yards on the season now with 3 rushing touchdowns. This is a team that's moving in the right direction. You've got Peyton Lynch, who's thrown for over 1,300 yards. It's not a team that has put up a ton of points this season, but I think if you're looking at their growth and development chart, it's trending up and to the right, which is right where you want to be, as moving from left to right on your radio dial. And so I think this is a team that is dangerous, a team that is still in the playoff discussion. All right.
They are.
We ran the numbers. We looked at them. They're going to have some things break their way and fall their way. But this is a team that is, all they have to do is win out. Now that's easier said than done. You mentioned their next 2 opponents. I don't think that Creekview is going to come out here and lay down. But I think this is a Woodstock team that had this game being played in week 1, I think, Creekview wins this one 59-0.
Right.
This week, I think it's a little bit closer. And the longer it stays close, the more that Woodstock has confidence, the more I would be worried if I was Creekview.
I agree, especially with that home crowd rallying. Woodstock sits currently 1-3 in the region standings. They will play Creekview and Sequoia to round things out. So, again, they're going to play the presumed 2 seed and the presumed 3 seed. If they win both, they'd be 3-3, which would be good enough normally for the 4 seed. The problem for them is River Ridge right now has the head-to-head over them. River Ridge will play Rome, Etowah, and Allatoona. We assume River Ridge being favored, if you assume that when they're favored they'll win, when they're underdog they'll lose, would also finish 3-3. They would be outside looking in. So River Ridge would need to lose again for Woodstock to get in. So you're going to be rooting for, believe it or not, Etowah at some point or Allatoona to beat River Ridge, which is certainly possible. The other downside to that is, this is the tightrope part, is that Allatoona has the head-to-head over Woodstock as well. So you can't let Allatoona win 2 games, because then they would have the head-to-head. Allatoona will face Etowah, Sequoia, and River Ridge. So you really need Etowah to win this week against Allatoona, and then you could also get Etowah to beat River Ridge, and then you could get Allatoona to beat River Ridge, and that would all work itself out. So that requires, again, for you to go undefeated the rest of the season, which we know is a big ask with Creekview and Sequoia, but mathematically speaking, there is still a chance.
There is still a chance. They've got to worry about this week's game And speaking of this week's game, we mentioned it before. We've got Coach Devine on the line. Coop, I think it's time we talk to the man of the hour.
Joining us now is the head coach of the Woodstock Wolverines, Coach Dan Devine. Coach, thank you for being back with us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely, Coach. Always look forward to it. Obviously, you guys had a big win on Friday, rivalry week in Cherokee County. You guys win the Battle of Town Lake. I want to ask about Sherrod Ellie and that one in particular. Had the 2 rushing touchdowns for y'all. That was the difference. We've seen your offense kind of grow and evolve in different ways. It started with a really good passing game, and then you guys were able to find the run game a little bit. But can you talk about Sherrod and the running back room and their growth throughout the season?
Yeah, we're really proud of Sherrod. You know, he's a senior. Had a couple coaches now in his career. So, you know, at the beginning of the season, kind of learning the system as the spring and the summer went along. You know, kind of struggled early. We played pretty good defenses too, you know, along the way that contributed to that. But, you know, Coach Pierce wants to definitely start the game with a run and work our RPO system off that. So, you know, it was good to see Friday night where we get some movement. And Rod just really grown as a back. His vision is just awesome, really. If you watch a lot of the runs, they're cutbacks. They're kind of, you know, starting one way and going another. So he did a great job of cutting it back and you know, and reading flow. But he runs tough. I think that's the great thing about Sherrod and the rest of our running backs is they're taught to run tough. Coach Walker, our running backs coach, does a great job about, you know, putting their head down, getting north-south, one cut, getting north-south, and that's really what we've done the last few weeks is even if it's just 2, 3, or 4 and getting those tough yards and staying ahead of the change and not getting behind it, I think that's always a plus for your offense as well. So we're proud of Rod and the rest of those guys. They running physical and getting behind our big guys. So they played really well.
Coach, you talked about Sherrod Ellie. Another senior I want to talk about, just a name, and then I want to have a question about your entire senior class here. But Peyton Lynch, like Sherrod, is a young man who's played now under his 3rd head coach and really at quarterback has really waited his turn. This is his first year as a starter. I think what's great about that is, you know, you read the Georgia High School Football Daily on Friday morning, and you kind of see the stat leaders, and it's great to see Cherokee County kids up there. And Peyton Lynch is a name that's showing up in the passing yardage category.
Yeah.
But talk about Peyton as a quarterback, his leadership, and then not just him, but the rest of your seniors who, from our purview, they've maybe helped flip the script on this program and turn things around. And what does this senior class look like for you so far with regards to culture in your program?
Sure, yeah. They mean the world to me, and I told them this, you know, before we started the year out, we have a senior dinner and a couple of senior meetings, and I told them, you know, they're going to be the group that we look back on in 10 or 15 years and say this is the group that kind of turned everything around for us. You know, so they're really important to me, and they've done a great job of kind of keeping our locker room together and setting the tone of our culture of accountability and physical and being tough. And, you know, Peyton's a kid where, you know, there was a no doubter when we voted on captains, you know, and he's one of them. And Cam Levette's another, and you know, and they do Tobias Sally's another, and you know, they're part of our captainship for a reason. You know, they show great leadership. They're poised. They're composed. You know, Peyton's grown even from when we got here in March all the way to now as a quarterback. Again, it's a credit to Coach Pierce, our offensive coordinator, done a great job with him. You know, has worked with him daily, almost even twice a day sometimes, just to get him, you know, where he is. And to your point, Peyton's a kid who waited his turn. He waited patiently and had a bunch of coordinators in the last few years and really taken to Coach Pierce's offense. And, you know, he's played really well. I think, you know, Peyton will tell you that, you know, taking care of the ball is the first thing, not making the mistakes and the turnovers kind of we made early in the year, and just staying ahead of the sticks. And he's really grown in this offense, and, you know, he's really taken a leadership role with our guys. And I couldn't be more proud of him and a lot of our seniors. You know, this is going to be a class that's really important to me, important to our coaching staff and our school, because, like I said, I like to look back on years from now and say, okay, this is a class that really triggered it all and got us back to the tradition of Woodstock football for sure.
Coach, I always like to ask a little X's and O's question every once in a while here. So you guys faced Etowah last week that has been dealing with injuries, and they come out in a completely different style of offense. What was the week of preparation like leading up to that? Was that something that you guys anticipated, or did you get out there on Friday and they showed up with that and you had to adjust to it? But what's the X's and O's answer on how you approach that kind of game?
Well, it was a lot of sleepless nights because they had the bye week before, so and I know Coach Kemper does a great job in prep over there, and we knew that their two guys were down, so we know they had the young kid there as well, JV kid, so we didn't know where he was going. He's shown a version of triple a little bit throughout the year. That's where kind of in my past helped me a little bit too. Coach, when we came in the first year together, when he hired me, he was gun triple as well. So, and really, a credit goes to our guys and our defensive kids because we really did it for about a day and a half, where we kind of do assignment football. Anytime you play, that Paul Johnson kind of Georgia Tech style or Navy style of triple, it's a more assignment football than it is anything. So, we practice without a ball a lot, just assignment, who's taking the dive, who's taking the quarterback and pitch, and give them credit. They ran a really good play. They busted one on a toss counter, and that kid could definitely move. He can run. So, but our guys did a great job, man. I give them a ton of credit for not having a ton of time to prepare for it. They come out and did a great job of stuffing it. And besides the big play, I don't think they got really anything major after that. And they just played their tails off for sure.
Coach, it's easy. Hindsight's always 20/20, and I know you still have 2 games left in the season. But so far, if we were back in August and we were asking you, Coach, you're sitting at 2-6, going into the last couple of games of the season. Are you satisfied? Are you dissatisfied? Are the number of wins, is that a metric for you for success that your team has had this season? And let me take a step back and just remind the folks listening that mathematically you all still have a chance to make the playoffs here. So let's not discount that either. But right. but is that a metric for you and your team as a win go preseason, or are you guys, hey, we're where we are, we're right on schedule? What does that look like in terms of expectation?
Yeah, I think coming in as a staff, we looked at it and we kind of self-scattered ourselves on what happened in the past and what we saw on film, and our goal was really progress on a weekly and daily basis. And I know that's kind of cliche to say, kind of coach speak, but it was the truth. I mean, there was the first few weeks, it was like, guys, we're not even looking at the board. Like, we're just literally, it's play by play. We're trying to get better snap by snap. And then you start building momentum and you start progressing to where you say, okay, offensively, we're moving the ball a little bit. We're able to throw it in the beginning of the year. Defensively, we just had given up so many big plays that if we're just kind of in the right spot in those, and you kind of say, okay, we just got to stay the course. And then you get the Lassiter win, which was great, and it's the first win in a long time, and you build momentum and you come out, the Thursday after that, you kind of get the doors blown off you by River Ridge, and so you just really want to progress, and anytime you win, the Battle of Town Lake and you beat those guys on the street, it's really, that's kind of a special night too. So, I mean, yeah, if you told me looking back and those would be the 2 wins, I think I'd be excited. But at the same time, to your point, I told our guys this week, we're still in a conversation, right? And that's the postseason conversation. And anytime you're in that conversation this late is always a good thing. So now it's, kind of putting that one behind us and putting those behind us and focusing on Creekview Thursday night.
Speaking of which, and again, a reminder to our listeners that we're on the phone with Coach Dan Devine, the head coach of the Woodstock Wolverines. Coach, you mentioned Thursday night. This will be your second Thursday night game. This time you all will be at home as the Creekview Grizzlies will be paying a visit to Town Lake. Tell us about what you know about the Grizzlies, and then what does your team need to do to be successful as both of these teams are coming off emotional rivalry games. Your team with the victory, Creekview with the loss on the other end. What does your team need to do to be successful on Thursday night?
Yeah, they're a really, really good football team. Coach Williams does a great job and his staff of preparing his kids. They're really physical on both sides of the line of scrimmage. They get downhill in a hurry offensively, and they're really tough on the defensive end. They're very stingy on what they do as far as assignment and coming from everywhere. So, I mean, it's going to be a really tough test for us on the Thursday. The good thing about it, I told our kids and our staff is, this is our second Thursday night game after, like I just said, after our last win, we came back against River Ridge, was really flat, really didn't have a good showing there. So hopefully we're learning from it this time, for sure. But, they're excellent. Their quarterback's a dual threat kid, and he can go, both ways and throw the ball well and run. And they kind of got playmakers on the outside. So it's going to be a really tough test, really, really good team. We just same as goals as every week is take care of the ball, stay in front of the sticks offensively, see if we can move the chains, win the field position battle, hopefully a turnover battle, similar to we did, Friday night and being in the fourth quarter. If we're in that, then now we've learned now in the last few weeks to say, okay, guys, even the Altoona loss, gets us in the fourth quarter, gets us meaningful snaps, and this is how you play in what we call money time, which is clutch time. And, so we've been similar to that the last few weeks. So hopefully that's going to help us out on Thursday.
Well, Coach, it should be a fantastic game. I am fortunate I'll be over there in Woodstock down in Town Lake to observe this. We won't be calling the game, but we'll be in attendance and looking forward to seeing your team. It's been a while since we've been out to see y'all play, and it's been great. It's been great to see y'all have success. Again, we talk about this.
Thank you.
Our goal is always to have every Cherokee County team play well, so we have a lot of good things to talk about. But you guys have been a good story to follow, and I know it's much more than a story with these young men and the work they put in and the work your staff has put in. So again, we want to say congratulations and wish you best of luck on Thursday night.
Thank you so much, guys, and always a pleasure joining you. Thank you again.
So thank you to Coach Devine for joining us here again on the North Georgia Sports Report. We appreciate him taking the time. We always know he's excited to talk about Woodstock football, especially after a good win. So,
absolutely.
Certainly helps for sure. But now that we've talked about Woodstock, let's jump into our game of the week. Again, this will be Etowah at Alatoona. Join us 7 o'clock Friday night, live on Station Head app, and you can also find us on northgasportsnetwork.com/live, where the Listen Live button is available for you as well. We talked about the loss. We'll get into that first. Look, Etowah's totally different. They ran the wing T, veer, triple option, something or another. It's weird. They ran a weird offense. By necessity, they needed to do it. It worked somewhat. Malone Pesquera is now the quarterback. He had a rushing touchdown. I think it was 46 yards, something like that. For Etowah, they only were able to garner 106 yards in total. And they had passed the ball one time, I think, and it was incomplete. So Etowah's getting one-dimensional just because of what they're trying to do. You can't blame them. It's just the necessity of the injuries. And your heart really breaks for Etowah because they are still, in some regards, fighting for a playoff spot. And they're really not that far out. They're going to play Alatoona this week, and then they play River Ridge. If they beat Alatoona this week, that game against River Ridge is the fourth seed for all intents and purposes. So Etowah's got to find a way to beat Alatoona. I think everybody knows about Alatoona at this point. They have one win. It was against Woodstock. It was by 3 points. Other than that, they've played a very tough schedule for their credit. North Paulding, Kell, Cartersville, Hillgrove, Creekview, and Rome. But for Etowah's sake, we also got to remember Coach Smith was the defensive coordinator at Alatoona for a few years. Now the defensive coordinator at Etowah. They do have a chance in this one, and they'll need a little bit of help.
Yeah, this is a gosh, I don't want to put any pressure on these Etowah players, and maybe Alatoona will listen too, but I think they know what's at stake. This is a playoff elimination game for both of these teams. If you lose this, with Alatoona, they're 1-3. They'd have a lot of work in front of them. Etowah at 4 losses, I just don't think there's a way to come back, to qualify for the playoffs. There's way too much that would have to happen. I think the problem is you're running out of time this late in the season. So, you mentioned they had to go to a different offense. It's a look that, as Coach Devine mentioned, when we talked to him, they'd seen that look a little bit earlier this season. I don't know for sure how much, if this is the offense they're going with, and we'll talk to Coach Kemper a little bit about that later on. But, just you feel for this Etowah team, just gut wrenching, the injuries they've had, in almost in successive weeks, they just kind of take out the guys that stir the drink for them. I mean, you were talking about a couple of quarterbacks and their running back, and I don't know how many teams can bounce back from those type injuries. I mean, maybe if it was just Jack and you still have Exie there, then you have something going on, or if it's Exie and you still have Jack there, then but now you got to put someone in at quarterback who's not as dynamic maybe as a Jack Strickland, and so you're changing your offense again. This is the one thing I like about Etowah, Coop. I really believe in their offensive line, and they have a defense that plays downhill, and those are things that certainly should help you set the edge and set the table in terms of a ball game. They're going to need to find a way to turn Allatoona over a couple of times, and you mentioned Coach Smith's familiarity, at least with personnel. On the Allatoona sideline, I don't know.
Obviously, a new coaching regime in Allatoona. But.
So, and this is an Allatoona team that struggled as well. The one win, a 3-point victory over Woodstock. So, by all metrics, you would think this game is within a touchdown either way of these two teams. This is a game that Allatoona won 21-16 last season, a game that we thought that Etowah should have taken from Allatoona. Yes. They played so well. For the Buccaneers, it starts and ends with Xavier Rucker, he's their leading rusher, 437 rushing yards. Also, they're one of their top receivers, 225 receiving yards. They'll go also with Camden Phillips, Deion Dobson, and Aiden Gilbo. They've combined for 55 receptions, 561 yards, but just 3 touchdowns. So it's not like Sadiq Teal, their quarterback, is not lighting it up throwing the ball, but he's a threat. And again, I think if you're Etowah, you got to find a way to load up the box, not let Rucker rip off huge passes. And then Teal, he's probably fixed a few of these issues, but when he first started last season, when he was splitting time last season. Man, I tell you what, he had some fumble problems in the pocket, and you got to I would think you got to put a lot of pressure on him, maybe to take Rucker away and make Teal beat you. Now, for as bad as some of the passes we saw Teal throw, we also saw him throw some great ones. It's like a tale of two guys. Like which quarterback for Allatoona do you get? If it's the good Sadiq Teal for Allatoona, it could be a long night for Etowah. If it's the one that's trying to force throws and overthrowing people, Etowah could be in this game late. And again, I take this back to the Woodstock Creekview game. I think if you're Etowah, you just want it close late till you can find a way to steal one on the road.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's the key. And let's talk to the man himself about what will be the keys to victory with Coach Kemper calling in right now. Let's take that interview. And joining us now is the head coach of the Etowah Eagles, Coach Matt Kemper. Coach, thank you for being back with us.
Thank you, guys. I always appreciate being on here with you.
Absolutely, Coach. We look forward to it and excited to talk to you because we haven't talked to you in a few weeks, so we wanted to get you back on here. We're going to be covering your game against Allatoona this week upcoming. I wanted to ask, as your defensive coordinator, Coach Smith, is the former DC at Allatoona, what does his experience with the program do in your preparation for preparing a team that he used to coach?
Well, I mean, I think, you try to watch as much film as you possibly can, but having firsthand knowledge of, some of the kids and things like that, obviously makes you feel like you're gaining an advantage. But, Coach Smith is a grinder and a worker, and he's going to be prepared. But at the same time, it's a weird feeling when you go out there and play a school that you used to coach at. And obviously, you want to win every time you step on the field. But truthfully, if you go out there, you want to win a little bit more, I guess.
Coach, last season we talked a lot about your secondary with guys like Frank Mosley and Jameer Maxime. And you've had to replace that talent. Certainly, Vinny Pacini has been a household name at safety. But you've got some other budding stars in your secondary, and how has this group grown over the course of the season, and maybe a group that might be overlooked as compared to some of the other units on your squad?
Well, I think definitely. I think Frank and and Jameer, they played there for so long, you know, it was kind of a shock when they weren't out there anymore. And you know, the guys that are coming in, they're younger, but they are extremely talented, very athletic, and you know, just the more time they have on the field together, the better they're going to get. The kids that want to go out there and compete, and you know, they've been learning a new system, and you know, we really need them to hit their stride here down this home stretch, and hopefully they can do that as they show, you know, Da Vinci Allen at one corner, Ethan Widener in another corner, you know, Brody Hendricks as a pony, and there's several other kids that have contributed there to go along with Vinny, and Vinny's had a great senior season. I'm really proud of him. But we've got some talent there. They're just young, and hopefully every game they get more experience, they get better, and get their feet under them even more. Because you know, as great players as Frank and Jameer were, you know, these guys have a lot of upside, and you know, looking forward to them having you know, many more successful years here in the future.
Coach, this season's been a bit of a roller coaster for your team in terms of injuries and all sorts of different things. Can you talk a little bit about what the message has been to them to keep them on track through the past month?
I mean, the roller coaster is putting it kind of mildly. You know, but yeah, you know, this is my 31st year in coaching, and I've never experienced anything like this. I mean, you know, there's times up to, you know, how, depending on how you look at it, we've had up to 8 starters out, and you know, with 4 ACLs, and they weren't things that happened because of things you're neglecting in the weight room. They're contact injuries, and you know, you can't blame it on anything but just talk on bad luck. And but you know, the thing that our kids are very close knit. They genuinely care about each other, and the message that I've tried to convey is, you know, it's always a message of you're going out there and you're playing for the guy next to you, and you know, sometimes when that guy next to you that's been there for 3 years, 4 years, for in some cases since second grade, goes down with a season-ending injury, you know, it would. I guess the message is it would be an insult not to go out there and play hard for that guy, one of your brothers who got taken by just crazy circumstances and crazy luck. And, you know, I mean, I'm a firm believer that, you know, a lot of people talk about football and they say it builds character and it builds self-discipline and it builds teamwork. Football teaches you how to run around, tackle people, knock people down, catch, throw, and run with an oblong ball. But you have the opportunity as a young person in this game to learn things like how to handle adversity and learn things like how to make a commitment. And that comes from the adults that are providing you leadership. And that's, you know, if anything, I've tried to, you don't talk about it with your team, but you certainly try to show it that, I mean, if I could go without sleep 100%, I would for these kids, because I'm going to do everything I can do to put them in a position to be successful. And, you know, sometimes from the stands that might not look like that's what we're doing, but it is. And, you know, they don't know all the – if you're not there every day and you don't know all the intricacies of what's going on, you know, we'll just put so-and-so in. Well, so-and-so might be hurt, you know, or things like that. And I guess that's the message to them is, look, we need to become even closer. We need to fight for each other. We need to fight for the guys that we've lost. And if we do that at the end of the day, win or lose, draw, whatever, and whatever the record is, you know, I hope those young men walk out of our program better men.
Well said, Coach. And
well said.
Yeah, and I'm going to switch gears here, and I think there's a lot of truth, a ton of truth in what you said, and maybe I'll just give a little bit of commentary before we switch gears of what goes in and day out. I think it's probably easy, you know, even from our seat in the broadcast booth to play armchair quarterback, but there's a lot more that goes on, in the heat of battle and things like that, and just the preparation. Certainly what we don't see in practice week in and week out in the halls of the school. But Coach, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about recruiting. And you have a young man on your team who, early on in the season, I don't think he had one firm offer, but Tate Nelms, probably the bell cow for that offensive line, has started to pick up a few offers. I know Virginia Wise had extended him an offer to play college football. I believe it was earlier this week, and congratulations to Tate. But what I want to ask you, with that offer coming so late in the season for him, how have you seen recruiting change maybe since COVID and the transfer portal, if you want to throw that in there at the college level? And what expectation should not just the young men at Etowah, but just players around the county, what expectation do you think they should have when they have aspirations to college ball when it comes to recruiting?
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Is this going to be the 3-hour show?
As much time as you want, Coach.
It's a disaster. Big-time college football has become the little NFL. And it's hard to even watch on Saturdays anymore with, this kid came from here and that kid came from there. And, they went and got this kid and they went and got that one. It's frustrating because all the things that we talked about just a few minutes ago, my own self, I grew up on a pig farm in Ohio, and if I didn't get to play football, I wasn't going to go to college, and luckily that worked out for me personally, but there are thousands and thousands of kids out there that, if they could have that opportunity to go and play college football, whether they, I was fortunate, but whether they even ever play, they're going to make contacts and they're going to make friends with people that are going to affect them the rest of their lives. And it's unfortunate that, it has become so much about the money and how much they're going to make off of TV because everybody wants to see that game and that program. And I think we're losing that. The fact that college football programs now have to give out an injury report every week, that's sad. And it's because of the money, and there's so much money in betting on those games, all that stuff. The Notre Dame AD a few years ago, I can't remember his name, but he kind of predicted that it was going to happen. That you're going to have college football programs, and they're going to declare, "Hey, we're going to pay our guys." And I agree with the philosophy of why that came about because, you got young men that are out there risking, in a lot of ways, risking their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And an institution or another entity is making millions and millions of dollars on it. So, yeah, they needed to be treated fairly. But now it's going to get to the point, that's what the Notre Dame athletic director said, that you're going to have institutions that say, hey, we're going to play professional football. And our guys aren't going to go to class. They don't need a degree. They're here to get ready for the league. And then you might have other institutions that say, hey, yeah, we're going to be a traditional college football program. But I worry that gets lost, and it's unfair for, some really great kids that are darn good football players that, if they got to an institution, they're working on their degree, they get to be 24/7, 365 training for football, and they're going to develop. They're going to be great players. They're going to be great people, and I really fear that we're losing them.
Well, that you can talk about a lot to unpack, Coach, and we all have certainly have our own opinions, but I think you hit the nail on the head on where this is going. And the reason that again, the reason why we asked that question is we saw Tate, and just at his size, we've seen him play. And we're extremely curious why it's taken so long for the offers to start coming in from any level.
Hey, that's three of us, brother, because that kid is a great football player, and he is whatever superlative I could come up with that's 10 times better than great as a human being. I mean, that young man's out. He is special. He does not complain about anything. He just works his tail off. He's a great kid. He's a 4.0 student. He comes from a great family. He takes nothing for granted. He is appreciative of everything. And you know, I just want him to have a good experience because however it goes, he is such a high character kid that he's going to be a very, very successful man one day.
Well, Coach, we certainly agree with that as we've gotten to know his family and, of course, him as a person and fantastic player, but also a great young man. I would be remiss if we didn't actually talk a little high school football while we had you on here. I know Art got you.
We're getting kind of deep into philosophy here.
We'll do the sports report after hours where we can have our philosophy.
This is good for ratings, Coach. Right. I mean, we
No, just let's get to the point where I say we got to take care of the football. The best team be great on defense.
Well, here you go. You guys are facing Allatoona this Friday, of course, our game of the week. We invite everybody to join us. We're excited to be able to go out and join you guys at Cobb EMC Field. Want to ask, what's it going to take for your team to be successful on Friday?
The same thing, I mean, we're going to look. Obviously, last week we had a lineup under center and put a young man that was a slot receiver at quarterback and run the veer. I mean, I coached that offense for 15 years in Ohio and Florida, but due to the injuries and could we get guys back? Could we, go out there with a half full pocket of tools? And, that young man gave us absolutely everything he had. But, it's the same formula. It's just going to look a little different this week. We got to be opportunistic offensively, and we got to play great defense. And we did get a play in the big play in special teams last week with the block punt, and Brody Hendricks, gutted it out. And he was not going to be denied from the end zone, but it was just, we just ran out of time. And, it's going to take that similar kind of attitude. It's going to take that similar kind of toughness because Allatoona is a physical football team. They're big. Their running back is very special. He hits things downhill. Quarterback, I would estimate he could throw the ball 70 yards. I mean, he has got a cannon. They're very salty on defense. So, we got to be smart with the ball. Don't take chances. If we get a short field, we need to get points.
Well, Coach, we certainly agree with those points. We're excited to see the new look Etowah Eagles in a certain sense, and of course, we're excited to be covering the game. And we appreciate you taking some time and being with us this evening.
It's always a pleasure, man. You guys are a class act. You do a great job, and we appreciate what you do, Cherokee County football.
So again, thank you to Coach Kemper for joining us. You got him a little fired up there, Art. Well, asking a little bit more of the deep questions, I think.
Well, Coop, we're that was a ratings question. I had to get him. I had to get Coach Kemper fired up. Just a little, I wouldn't even say controversy, but we don't get a whole lot of opportunity to talk about the other side of these high school players that do have aspirations to go play ball in college. And I think one of the things that we never do talk about, we laud and praise so much about the young men getting offers, and we're certainly excited about that. I think what gets lost is just kids wanting to be good high school football players in that. But take that a step further, the kids that do want to go play college ball and where we're going, and it's like the rich get richer, and with the transfer portal, and I don't have all the statistics, or I don't have the statistics in front of me right now, but it's made it very difficult, I feel like, for some players to get those offers from colleges that seem like they would have come a lot sooner, and Tate Nelms being one of those young men. So again, a very passionate conversation. I think that's something that I don't know if the common fan cares or knows or understands, some of that, how that dynamic has changed the recruiting landscape in college football for high school players and going to college.
Yeah, probably not. It's probably something that we focus on more than others, but either way, that's kind of our job at the end of the day. So, well, let's break down this Etowah-Allatoona game, some keys to the game, as I typically do here. Real simple. They're 3. Neither of them are turnovers, so everybody should be happy with that. I finally diversified a little bit. Number 1's field position. This is a game that Etowah is going to have, I think, some struggles moving the football. Look, I'd love to tell you they're going to go out there and light it up. I just don't see that happening with the injuries they have. They're going to have to make do with what they have. Doesn't mean they're not able to score. It just means that they're going to have to be picky when they do it, but a big part of that would be field position. So I think field position game's number 1. Number 2, special teams are going to need to be special. We've talked about Gray Kelly, who is unfortunately at Allatoona and doing great things there. Obviously, he's hammered home some 45-plus yard field goals, averaging over 40 yards per punt. So the field position thing in the special teams game is going to be tough. Liam Kinsella is going to have to be dynamic, and whoever I even think Reese Weir was the punter. So whoever is punting now for Etowah will have to also be good at flipping the field in some regard there. And then my third key is Etowah is going to need to score. This is not a game that I see them winning 7-3. This is a game that is going to live in the teens or 20s. So you are going to have to find a way to scratch the board 2-3 times in this game. How do you do that? That's up to you, whether that's defensive touchdowns, special teams touchdowns, traditional offensive touchdowns. I don't know. They'll figure that out. But this is a game that if you think Etowah could win this 7-6, as much as Allatoona has struggled, they have been slightly consistent with scoring over that metric. The only time they've been shut out was against Rome and Cartersville. So, getting shut out by Rome and Cartersville really isn't saying much now, is it? So all that said, those are my keys to this game.
An interesting thing I want to take a look at, Allatoona was off last week.
Yep.
I wonder if there's any rust for the Bucks on their bye week, or are they come back rejuvenated?
Well, they did get a win going into the bye against Woodstock.
They certainly did.
So that may, give them a little bit more confidence.
Certainly did. So if there is any rust with that Allatoona team, and again, that's a team, they're probably over there saying the same thing we're saying, hey, we're still in the playoff conversation, guys. And I think if you're Etowah, you got to jump on them fast, come maybe, with the shock. And your defense, I almost feel like your defense is going to have to find a way to get 1 or 2 turnovers or find a way to win that turnover margin, maybe even put the ball in the end zone. I think that's certainly a bonus. And then load the box. I talked about Xavier Rucker again. You've got to find a way to stop their number 1 threat and force, in my opinion, you have to force Sadiq Teal to beat you. And he might. He just might. We talked about him. He can. He's a dynamic quarterback. He throws a very catchable ball, a pretty ball, and Coach Kemper even mentioned he probably can throw that thing 70 yards. Now, his accuracy may on some of those throws leave something to be desired, but he's a young man that I think has come a long way in his senior season as well. So that's to me that's the key to victory. Make him throw the ball and turn them over.
Yeah.
And okay, those are pretty standard. You didn't mention turnovers. I'm going to. I had to. That was it. You got to find a way to run the ball also if you're Etowah.
Yeah, I agree.
Effectively.
I think I actually take the flip side. I think you have to find a way to pass the ball. Again, they only attempted 1 pass. It was incomplete. You are going to have to do just a handful.
I think when you say a handful, I think Etowah can, if they can run the ball successfully, they can probably throw the ball 7 times, no more than 7 times, and still win this ball game.
Yeah, no, I get that, but you can't go 0 for 1 passing.
Probably not.
Not
unless you have a couple of defensive scores.
Well, yeah, but I think that realistically you are going to need to complete some because, if I'm Allatoona, I put 11 guys in the box.
I think that then at that point the game plan is the same for both teams.
Well,
whose quarterback's going to beat me?
Yeah, well, Malone Pesquera started as a receiver. Now I hope he's been, practicing throwing the ball somewhat, but you'd have to give the edge to Sadiq Teal, who is a 2-year starter at this point.
Right.
So you kind of hope it doesn't become a quarterback battle just because you're talking about down the road. So I think the key is Pesquera being able to run the ball. And, again, they're running a new offense. Doesn't seem like they turned the ball over against Woodstock, so that's a credit to them because that's going to be the key there is taking care of the football. You mentioned it. It's going to be an interesting game for sure.
It is. Coop, you mentioned special teams. We talked about Gray Kelly. I talked about him a couple weeks ago when Altoona beat Woodstock. I think he's going to be the difference ultimately, whether it's flipping the field with his punts or booting a long field goal. I think this is a game that is a one-score game either way, but I think the edge in special teams goes to Altoona, and I think that in a game that's this close, I think they have a slight edge, especially with Etowah not having that firepower on offense.
Yeah, I agree. Well, join us Friday night. Again, we'll be going live around 7 o'clock. Station Head app, stationhead.com, or northgasportsnetwork.com/live. Join live button at the bottom. You can click on that. It'll take you all to the same place. Make sure you join us. Just be Art and I. Everybody else is moonlighting or whatever you call it. Not moonlighting, but dipping out, I guess.
Dipping out. Well, I know there's a word for it.
There's some term I'm trying to think of.
I'll tell you what, you try to think of that term. I'm going to talk about some of the other games in the area to talk about. We've got a maybe two handful of games that are important. Sprayberry will host Roswell. That's a Thursday night game coming up. Another interesting game to see where Sprayberry is in that region, whether they will be a playoff team. Alpharetta will host Johns Creek. Lassiter hosts Pope. And that's in Region 7, 6A. In Region 5, 7A, a couple of other games are going on. North Cobb will host Kennesaw Mountain, and Osborne will host Wheeler. And a very interesting matchup here. Like, again, we talked about this before. Two teams who have been kind of, on the outside looking in over the last few years, battling what we feel like is for that third and fourth playoff spot for the right to play either Buford or Mill Creek. Very fun. Good luck to you guys there. Speaking of the aforementioned Mill Creek, who got a big win over Buford, they'll travel to Collins Hill. Buford will travel to Decula. Mountain View will play Central Gwinnett. So those are those teams in that region over there. Now, this is not this is region 6, 7A, if I'm not mistaken, with big game over there. West Forsyth will host Milton. That game, as it stands, those two teams are, I believe, 3-0 in their region, and that should be for a region title. West, a team kind of, we saw them play Cherokee earlier. I don't want to say coming out of nowhere, but I think they were maybe a year away from where they are now, but they've got an opportunity to slay the dragon there. Milton, I believe, has won like 30-something consecutive region games, so they've got a streak going on as well. Another game with region title implications in Class 5. Kell's going to host Greater Atlanta Christian. Hiram will play Cass. Two teams, I believe, that are with their playoff fate at hand. Yeah, both of them are 0-2. Neither one of them can afford to fall to 0-3. Cass, I believe, lost to Dalton last week, if I'm not mistaken. I believe Hiram still has yet to play Dalton.
They lost to Calhoun
and Cartersville last week, so they're 0-2 as well. So both of those teams need a win in a bad way. Pickens will host West Hall. Lumpkin, the fighting Mason Sullins, man. The Lumpkin County Indians will face White County, a team that can put a lot of points on the board, but I just don't know if they have what it takes in the tank. And then Fellowship Christian, a team that went up to Athens last week. Now, they're a Class 2A team over in Roswell. They went up to Athens Christians and beat them in a good way. I did not see that coming. They will host Providence Christian as they look to continue their stranglehold on Region 8 2A over there. So there's just some games around the area to keep your eye on Friday night. Again, the Sprayberry-Roswell game is Thursday. Creekview Woodstock game is on Thursday, but all the other games will be on Friday night. And, man, I'm looking forward to it. I know there's going to be some rain in the area between Thursday and Friday. I don't know what impact it will have on the games. We hope it will all clear out. We hope it will happen after the games on Thursday and then before noon on Friday.
Yeah, get the turf nice and dry, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, make sure you join us again Friday night. We'll be going over all those scores. We'll also have, by the end of the night, a much clearer playoff picture. Of course, if you're a fan of Cherokee County, as we always do, we like to keep tabs on the other Cherokee County teams. So if you're looking for River Ridge Rome updates, we'll have them. If you're looking for Cherokee Walton updates, we'll have them. And if you're looking for, Creekview and Woodstock, we'll play.
We'll have that result already.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on the pregame show. So if you're a fan of either of those teams, join us early on Friday night because we'll, again, go live at 7 o'clock, and we'll do a pregame show where we'll talk a little bit about those all in more detail. So all that being said, again, Station Head app, stationhead.com. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. So long, everybody. We'll see you Friday.